Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Moore, Mr. Tfank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General, Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, February the 7th, 2023. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs,
Present.
Commissioner Decker,
Present.
Commissioner Bonner to join us later, Commissioner Kalanche,
Here.
and Commissioner Sobroff not present. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item 3 on the agenda today. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic, and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in one of a number of ways that are outlined on the agenda. At this time, we're going to go to item number 1 on the agenda, and that is some remarks that I would like to make today. I want to say a couple of words before we proceed to the report of the chief. Last week, I received official notification that one of the members of the Board of Police Commissioners has decided to resign effective February 15th, 2023. This is sad news for me personally and marks a notable benchmark for the governing body of the Los Angeles Police Department. For me, I'm losing a partner, one who provided exceptional guidance and insight into the various policies that govern the LAPD, as well as the individuals charged with carrying out those policies. For the city, it will be the loss of someone who has provided unparalleled leadership to the Board of Police Commissioners and the LAPD. Last week, Commissioner Eileen Decker informed me that she was resigning her position on the commission. I would like to take some time this morning to acknowledge the vast body of work and the dedicated public service of Eileen Decker. Commissioner Decker is the epitome of a public servant. She is renowned for her knowledge, professionalism, dedication, and her decades of tireless work. For those of you who may not be aware, Commissioner Decker started her career in public service as an assistant United States attorney. She served in this capacity for 15 years. She then served as Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Homeland Security for both Mayor Antonio Villagrosa and his successor, Mayor Eric Garcetti. In June 2015, Commissioner Decker was unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the United States Attorney for the Central District of California. She served in this capacity for the remainder of President Obama's second term. Commissioner Decker was appointed as a police commissioner on October 26, 2018. She served as this board's vice president from November 2018 to August 2019, when she was then elevated to the position of president until July 2021. During her time on the commission, Commissioner Decker took the lead in driving initiatives to help modify and reform use of force training directives and policy matters. She was instrumental in revising the reporting of non-categorical use of force incidents. She helped to lead modification and revision of reporting on hate and related incidents and crimes. She led the development of the automated license plate reader policy. She led the reform on elimination of chokeholds. In addition to those reforms, Commissioner Decker was one of the leaders in changing the department's policy on pretextual stops. She also spent countless hours updating and revising the department's Board of Rights Manual and Hearing Examiner Handbook. In addition, she took the lead in ensuring that recommendations from various reports arising from the civil unrest of 2020 were implemented. I believe that when historians look back on Commissioner Decker's contributions to our city and the police department in particular, they will conclude that her accomplishments are truly groundbreaking and place the department on a trajectory towards true 21st century policing. Also, I cannot forget one of Commissioner Decker's true passions, her focus on the recruitment, retention, and advancement of women in the department. She was and is an unrelenting leader on this issue. It is one of her signature accomplishments that will leave a lasting mark on the department and one that will doubtlessly be Commissioner Decker's legacy. I want to applaud Commissioner Decker for her untiring sacrifice and time that she has given to the department and to the city of Los Angeles. Thank you for your commitment to public safety of this city and your unwavering drive to initiate and implement much needed reforms within the Los Angeles Police Department. Commissioner Decker, it has been an honor and a pleasure to serve on this commission with you. I believe I speak for my fellow commissioners in saying that you will be missed and we wish you well in your next chapter.
May I, Commissioner Briggs?
Yes, Commissioner, go ahead. Absolutely.
Well, first of all, thank you. I did not expect you to make the announcement today, but I thank you for doing so and for your incredibly kind words. They were very generous. And as you note, about a month ago, I did inform the mayor's office of my intent to step down, doing so for a new job that I'll be starting later this month. But I do so with a tremendous sense of gratitude to my fellow commissioners. Thank you for your service to this city. Many don't realize we all do this as volunteers, even though it is a full-time commitment. So thank you. But I do want to extend my deepest appreciation to both Commissioner Briggs and Commissioner Soboroff, two commissioners who also served as president during my tenure. And having been president, I know the amount of work entailed and the commitment required. And I am grateful for you two taking on these responsibilities and for your guidance and counsel over many years. I do want to thank the men and women in the department who serve with distinction, particularly in very challenging times. Thank you to your service to the city, to my city. As a resident, I am grateful. Also, members to the command staff, I want to thank you for your commitment to service, the many, many meetings, the many discussions, and all the work accomplished. Your dedication to the city of Los Angeles is evident, and I know you will continue all of that work with great diligence. Chief Moore, it's been a privilege to watch you as chief. There are many who criticize, which is important to listen to. But we all have to realize it's easy to criticize and very hard to do the work. I've witnessed your dedication, your many efforts to improve this department, to support the men and women who work in it every day, and to respond to the community and the many, many voices who wish to influence your decisions. In my opinion, you deserve a second term and you earned it. But beyond that, the city is fortunate to have you and your steady hand in the many years ahead. To the commission staff, I want to thank them as well. They're always responsive, always cheerful, always helpful. I do want to thank them for their service and dedication to the work of the commission. You make all of our jobs easier, so thank you. To the Inspector General and his staff, Some of the most important work this commission does is generated from your office. That is the oversight of the use of force cases. Your professionalism in taking this task on is just extraordinary. We could not effectively perform our functions without you, so thank you, Mr. Smith, and your entire team, but most especially for me. When I do reflect on my time as a commissioner, I will always reflect on Mr. Richard Tiefenk, who has a steady hand, is always helpful, always knowledgeable, always respectful. And for me, during my tenure as president, his guidance and counsel were simply immeasurable. So my thanks is really not enough to repay him for all of he did, but thank you, Mr. Tiefenk. I know that the over 25 other police commissioners with whom you have worked over the years feel the exact same way. So thank you to you all. Commissioner Briggs, I'm sorry to take up this time. I didn't quite expect you to announce it this morning, but because you did, I just wanted to express my sincere thanks to all of the members of this department, the commission staff, and members of the public with whom I've had the privilege to work. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker, and thank you for your kind words. It's really been a pleasure working with you. At this time, I want to turn to.
May I say, may I make one statement here? Is
Commissioner Soboroff? Yes, go ahead.
Sure. You covered it, Mr. President, very well. And Commissioner Decker, Eileen, it's an emotional thing because we all know what you've put into it. And to make the kind of changes that you've made and the different experiences you've had in representing a mayor running public safety, in being a United States attorney, in being a police commissioner, in being the president, all of those have given you an opportunity to make change, to hold the line when the line needs to be held, to be the 4-1 or 3-2 when it's on the other side. You can't do that even with your experience without being Eileen Decker. You can't do it. You can't do it without having the makeup, the personality, the DNA to get things done. Because the bureaucracy can eat you up. The system can eat you up. Democracy is exhausting. And it takes a special kind of person and personality. And I just want to thank you and your folks for letting you be you. It's been helpful to all of us, and it's been helpful to the city. And I know you're the one resigning, and for other opportunities as well. And I just hope you are as proud of yourself as we all are of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. At this time, I want to briefly discuss the Board of Rights process and some potential reforms. On January 7th, 2023, this year, a 29-year-old Black man was pulled over by the Memphis police for alleged reckless driving. What should have been a routine traffic stop turned into an utter nightmare as the world subsequently watched a depraved, brutal, and senseless killing of a young man by those who carry a badge and gun. I refuse to call those assailants police officers because they were no more than thugs with guns. Rather than calmly explaining to Tyree Nichols the reason for the traffic stop, that organized group of criminal assassins instead belligerently told Nichols, "I'm going to beat your ass." Tyree remained calm even when he was forcibly snatched from his car and brutally pinned to the ground, where another bully shouted that he was going to tase Tyree. As video evidence shows, those men with guns subsequently beat Tyree with fist, feet, and a baton, all while he called for his mother. 3 days after that indefensible and immoral, corrupt behavior by those sworn to protect lives, the world learned that Tyree Nichols died of his injuries. 13 days later, the chief of Memphis Police Department announced that she had fired the 5 police officers after an investigation into Nichols' death. Last week, during the commission's questioning of Chief Moore, I asked the reason the LAPD could not take swift action similar to the chief of police in Memphis in terminating officers who clearly should not be with the department. He responded that under the Los Angeles City Charter, he has only the power to recommend that an officer be fired, and that it is up to the Board of Rights panel after a hearing to either adopt that recommendation or impose a lesser penalty. Last year, in response to a request from the Commission and City Council, the Office of Inspector General performed both a quantitative and qualitative analysis of the Board of Rights. The Inspector General concluded that as a result of the charter change that allowed the City Council to adopt an ordinance for an all-civilian panel of the Board of Rights, those all-civilian panels have been extremely lenient towards officers and have refused to adopt the recommendations of the Chief of Police when he requested that officers be terminated from the department. Indeed, the Inspector General wrote, "Disciplinary findings and decisions made by the Chief of Police regarding officers who fall under the Chief's command can be overruled by the Board of Rights, and they frequently are. Sometimes, in cases involving the most egregious types of misconduct, this means that the chief has no choice but to retain an officer whom the chief has already determined is no longer fit to perform the essential duties of a peace officer and should be terminated from the employment within the department." The Inspector General found that 76% of closed Board of Rights hearings resulted in either a not guilty or no penalty finding on a reduced penalty for one sought by the Chief of Police. This is simply unacceptable. The Inspector General recommended that the City Council rescind its ordinance and return the Board of Rights to a system of 2 sworn officers and 1 civilian. Last week, Mayor Bass called upon the department to work with the City Council to also rescind the ordinance that permits an all-civilian panel. I now call upon the City Council members to move swiftly in rescinding the ordinance that permits all civilian Board of Rights panels. I ask that the City Council move with all deliberate speed in revoking that ordinance. Thank you. At this time, we'll go to item 2 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police.
Commissioner President Briggs, thank you. Commissioner Vice President Decker, Commissioner Clancy, Commissioner Bonner, Commissioner Sobroff. Let me first begin by, I'm going to do this a little bit out of order. I want to talk about significant events first. I'll get into COVID status of that. There has been some changes, as well as our crime and personnel strength. But first, in regards to significant events, let me echo the remarks of Commissioner President Briggs regarding Commissioner Decker. Her dedication, her service to this city, really to this country as a former U.S. attorney, but as Deputy Mayor of Homeland Security and Public Safety, transitioning into the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then coming to this department as a commissioner and leadership as both the president as well as vice president. Your departure today is bittersweet. The sweetness of it is that it's your decision as you pursue other opportunities and in the next stage of a next chapter. The bitterness of it is having seen what you've accomplished during your tenure here, which has only been the next chapter in a life of service, in a life that challenges law enforcement to build and continue its reforms and building trust and providing for community safety, balancing that with recognizing and respecting our long history where we've had shortcomings and shortfalls, and how that shortcomings and shortfalls sometimes have been baked in or become part of a system rather than an individual's failure, but really a part of a system's way of how it goes about policing a city such as Los Angeles. You have and continue to approach this topic with an intellect and a dedication and a tenacity that is unmatched in my experience, and one that I have appreciated as chief, but also previously in my earlier assignments with an organization, that you walk into a room with a confidence, but also an approachability that you want to hear why and how things occur in the city and how they've occurred over time, but then willingness to bring to us and challenge the status quo. And whether it's regarding the gender diversity and the deepening of our culture that welcomes women, not just in recruitment, but in retention and accelerating their representation through all areas of this organization, or the critical use of force and other reforms that have happened, including the establishment of what I believe is a national standard for pretext stops that appropriately direct officers to limit their conduct and their stops and their authority in manners of ensuring that communities that are oftentimes felt over-policed and over-surveilled, that there is a striking a balance where they use their authority in a manner that provides for public safety, but also builds trust in those very same communities that those officers have dedicated their lives to try to serve. As you depart here, know that you have my personal gratitude as a chief and just as an individual for the countless times in which you've offered sage counsel and encouragement and support. These last years of the pandemic and the downsizing of this organization and the challenges to the health and even the very existence of our workforce has been many opportunities for an organization to retreat, for an organization to pull back and just hold the status quo. You've been a voice that has challenged that, to challenge us to show that our better angels and our moments of real truth of our adherence to core values is before us as an opportunity rather than a crisis of some type of matter that we must do, but instead that we must do it to absolutely demonstrate our worth and our dedication, our strength. So thank you for everything you've done. I wish you nothing but the best. And has been referenced shortly by Commissioner Sobroff, the real debt of gratitude also goes to your family, to your husband and your children. This is not a position as a commissioner. I cannot imagine the calculus of how you explain that to them with the amount of dedication and the need for your continued involvement, not just in the day-to-day and the transactions of tactics and strategies going forward, but really the holistic look at this organization. So to them, I say thank you. And as to the Decker family, I am grateful as an Angelino as well, as a resident of the city and a man that's been, and a person who's dedicated his life to this city and to this department. I am grateful for your tenure. And as Commissioner Briggs has indicated, people often talk about what will be your legacy. Your legacy will be one of excellence, and your legacy will be at times of one of intimidation for those that follow you to live up to what you've done and accomplished. Secondly, last week I attended the matter of the determination of this Board of Police Commissioners for my reappointment. And the public session, I was reminded by our city attorney that was not the appropriate moment for conversation. So in that it was, I do believe, a significant event. Let me comment now and just essentially echo my statement that I made in the public in regards to this decision by this commission for my reappointment to a second and final term. First to the commission, to each individual, thank you for the opportunity for our discussions, for the questions and the challenges of both my performance in the past as well as the future of this organization and my leadership within it, and how I see my role in continuing our efforts for a safer city and a city that builds trust in each of our communities. I appreciate and value and will forever work each day to uphold the faith and confidence that you provided with the affirmation of my reappointment. But I also want to extend to every member of this organization, of this department. My success, for whatever measure it is a direct result of the men and women, including the command officers of this department, who come to work every day, and I believe struggle and strive to do the best job in difficult and trying circumstances and excel. And I want to thank each of them, because this reappointment is also a statement about this department and the state of this department today, in regards to the public safety of the city and its work to do everything within its power to demonstrate that it is worthy of the trust and confidence of the city, the second largest city in America, and that we will take on new challenges and that we'll find further ways of improving and deepening our trust and the safety of the city. So those men and women, I appreciate you, I see you, and I know that I have the privilege of a lifetime to be able to tell your story and to lead this organization in a manner that I hope and pray each day brings you confidence that I'm protecting and serving you as you protect and serve the people of Los Angeles. Next, what I'd like to move into is the significant events that we also had tragically this week, a double fatal that occurred following a collision involving a pursuit of a stolen vehicle. The summary of that was on the 29th of January in the San Fernando Valley, a 2002 Toyota Tundra was reported stolen to the Mission Community Police Station. The registered owner had parked that vehicle along the 8400 block of Sepulveda and unfortunately left his keys in the vehicle. And moments later came back, or minutes later came back and found the vehicle had been stolen. A few days later, on the 31st at approximately 7:42 in the evening, Foothill uniform officers responded to a radio call of a auto theft suspect there in the 10,600 block of El Dorado. The comments of the call provided a vehicle description, the license plate, suspect description, and a query of the license plate confirmed that it was a stolen vehicle. As officers were responding, they requested an airship, and as they approached the location, they observed the vehicle in question driving without its headlights. Inside the vehicle was a driver that matched the description provided, as well as a female passenger. Officers requested a backup of the supervisor and an airship and began following the vehicle. During the following, they requested 2 additional units due to the number of the occupants, concerned about there being potentially more occupants inside the vehicle, that should their termination of the stop, the suspects flee, that they would have sufficient personnel to safely apprehend those involved. The suspect began making in this vehicle invasive moves as officers followed. At that time, the officers initiated a vehicle pursuit, and that pursuit traveled in various streets in the northeastern part of the San Fernando Valley, including the 5 freeway and the 170 freeway. There it exited on Roscoe and traveled again through various streets in the Mission Division. Officers again efforted to have the airship overhead, and communications advised that airship had responded, and there at that time a tracking was initiated. Tracking is a vehicle pursuit tactic where the department, through the training and guidance with our officers, direct the officers to back away from the immediate proximity of the pursued vehicle and allow the airship to overhead track the movements. This is done in an effort to slow the suspects or the suspect vehicles' driving tactics and to increase a measure of safety for the surrounding community. During this effort, I'm sorry, I've got a hiccup in my Zoom. Here's that someone else is trying to log on to my account. My apologies. During this tracking maneuver, the suspect's vehicle began pulling away from the officers. The pursuit eventually traveled westbound on Cantera Street through the Kaiser Permanente Hospital facility. There's a street that has a facility that has a land bridge over the top of it, and it traveled down that street. And as the suspect vehicle approached Woodman Avenue, tragically, the vehicle collision occurred. Officers, as they approached the intersection, they observed the aftermath of the collision. The officers did not observe the collision because there had been some distance between the officer's vehicle and the suspect's vehicle. After the crash, the driver of the vehicle fled on foot. He was taken into custody a short time later and during a non-categorical use of force, which included body weight, a firm grip, and the deployment of a taser. The individual was identified as Oscar De La Cruz, a male Hispanic. Officer De La Cruz was in and out of consciousness upon officers taking him into custody, and advised the officers he had taken drugs and was possibly overdosing. An officer administered Narcan, which improved his condition, and requested an ambulance to the scene. Also, other responding officers arrived on the scene of the crash and observed the two occupants of the community of the other vehicle that was involved in the collision. Officers began rendering aid to one of those victims through an open car window until the LAFD resources arrived. Unfortunately, with paramedics' arrival and their efforts to render aid to both occupants of that vehicle, both were pronounced deceased at the scene. The passenger of the stolen vehicle remained in that vehicle, was pulled from the vehicle and was rendered aid and had complained of injuries and was later released and was not arrested. A multidisciplinary collision team responded. This is known as MSIT. This is a highly specialized collision investigation team that responds to any fatal or serious injury involved collision involving any department vehicle. So such as this, where we have a vehicle pursuit where a resulting collision resulting in the death of tragically the death of these two individuals, that becomes an MSIT collision. That investigation will involve both a forensic review of the scene as well as transcribed interviews of all personnel that are involved, and eventually will be reviewed by me through the chain of command for the actions taken by the officers and their adherence to our policies and procedures relative to vehicle pursuit tactics, as well as the events before, during, and after this collision. The individual that was arrested, Mr. De La Cruz, was initially arrested for a second-degree murder. He was booked at the Valley Jail section after receiving treatment for some minor injuries. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office has reviewed this entire investigation and has requested additional information relative to the murder charge. However, they did file 2 counts of felony gross vehicular manslaughter, 1 count of felony evading resulting in the death of an individual, and 1 count of felony hit and run. Given the enormity of what happened here and the tragic loss of life and our involvement, I've directed for a critical incident video to be released in the coming days. This will be a matter to, again, provide the public with as much information and transparency as possible. It will involve the radio call of the officers, as well as the digital in-car video and body-worn video of those that are involved in the primary pursuit, and then the aftermath with the foot pursuit and the arrest of Mr. De La Cruz. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the various community events that we had. I do want to thank Daphne Branford of Building Blue Bridges for our Good Troubles Bridge Walk and Summit last week with the Dorsey High, Luck, and St. Mary's Academy students and faculty that participated. 3rd annual event, a tremendous event, an opportunity for questions and answers and to meet young people. And it was one of the high points of my week, seeing the next generation of Angelinos and as students, the promise they have for our future. Regarding COVID update and vaccines, this week we had 25 additional cases of positive COVID-19 tests. Of that, 22 of those individuals had been previously vaccinated, which is 88%. As far as our work status, we have saw an improvement with now 68 individuals recovering at home from a COVID-19 virus. That's 38 fewer officers than what I reported last week. There remain 12 long COVID cases. That is an improvement, 2nd week in a row of seeing an improvement of 1 fewer long COVID case, and the individual returned back to work. Significantly, this last Friday, the city of Los Angeles updated its COVID-19 workplace safety standards. And involved in that was the department was notified by the personnel department that all employees with pending exemption requests for medical or sincerely held religious beliefs related to the city's COVID-19 vaccine mandate will be notified and receive an administrative approval from the department. This is a provision by the personnel department that acted in the aftermath of working with the EERC, which is a governing body with the mayors and city council and CAO's involvement to the formulation of and the mandates of various requirements for employment with the city of Los Angeles. For those that have not been vaccinated and have filed for this administrative exemption, whether it be for religious or sincerely held religious beliefs, we still remain, as of today, with weekly testing to ensure or to monitor their condition, and that's called a weekly surveillance. There is some efforts currently with that evolving as the COVID-19 crisis evolves. Regarding crime, briefly, we experienced a tough week with an increase in shooting violence with 47 individuals shot this last week. That was a marked departure from earlier weeks. We still, however, see year to date a reduction in homicides. We remain at 10 fewer homicides this year versus last. That's 31 versus 41. That's a 37% reduction. We still have a reduction in violent crime in all categories with a 10.4% reduction. That's 293 fewer violent crimes in the city in the first essentially 5 weeks. In regards to property crime, we still see reductions in each category for an 8.7% reduction. That's 841 fewer property crimes for an overall total Part 1 crime reduction of 9.1%. In comparison to 2021, that we still have an overall increase of 2.2%. And in comparison to 2019, which was the last pre-COVID year, if you will, Part 1 crime stands at a 5.7% reduction today versus 2019. One of the issues that I want to bring up to the public as the stark increase that we've seen, continued persistence of catalytic theft occasions in the city of Los Angeles. What I mean by that is that year to date, we have seen 406 more catalytic converter thefts from vehicles across the city, with the leading area being Central area with 71 additional catalytic thefts in the first 5 weeks. That's 95 in Central area versus 24 during the same period last year. And as a reminder, last year we had saw an increase in catalytic thefts as well. As we look at this problem, recognizing that burglary, theft from motor vehicles, we still have about a 7% reduction. That's 459 fewer thefts from vehicle, which I'm encouraged. That's a good sign of progress and fewer property crimes. But I'm very much taken back by the stark increase of 408 additional catalytic theft involving individuals that are working in crews frequently to go and prey upon neighborhoods to take these items to have them resold for their precious metal points. We are working with our LA County trap officials, as well as assembling additional task force efforts within the department to amplify our efforts. Arrests are being made weekly by individuals that are being found in possession of multiple catalytic converters, and our now investigative work looks to the recently passed legislation for salvage yards as to their responsibilities to ensure that they have documentation for all catalytic converters parts that they have, as to the right for them to purchase those from registered owners of those converters, instead of what we believe today is happening, which is simply greed that is driving receivers to go out and pay hundreds of dollars for these catalytic converters to have them melted down for the precious metals, and creating a very aggressive market in regards to individuals that would go out and prey upon our communities and take these devices, which, as you know, cost thousands of dollars in order to replace. So there'll be more information on that as we move forward, but this is an effort that to report on you a significant issue in regards to our safety and our community sense of safety in their neighborhoods. Personnel strength, as I close, we have 9,236 personnel. That's an increase of 4 additional sworn positions. That still has us 224 under strength in regards to our sworn deployment. Our personnel, civilian professional staff stand at 2,660. That's an increase of 3 from my previous report, approximately 45 individuals underneath our authorized strength. Our reserve officers, I'm happy to report, have increased. The number has now grown to 431. That's an increase of 23 additional reserves and a sizable opportunity for us as a resource to help police the city of Los Angeles. And our volunteers stand at 2,298, just under 2,300 of those. Again, for both the volunteers and reserves, I am grateful on behalf of community members, citizens of Los Angeles, for their dedication and volunteerism in providing for the safety of our neighborhoods. That concludes my reports. I'm happy to take any questions. And again, I appreciate your indulgence on the time.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Soboroff, any questions for Chief Moore?
Chief, the catalytic converters are it's a whole process, isn't it? It's a organized group. It's not just a few people going out, stealing them and using them or selling them.
Well, the depth of them, first of all, it's a very it's a very simple process in order to steal a catalytic converter. It's a matter of getting underneath the car, and we can be removed in a matter of a minute and a half at the most. We've actually seen some people lose their life because they've gotten under a car and the jack has failed or otherwise, and they've, in an effort to steal these items, have lost their life. So it's easy pickings in that sense. They essentially drive around and look for the makes and models, and there are favorites of these crews because some vehicles have more of the precious metals than others. So they're targeting makes and models, and there are crews because of, we believe, the underground market that exists, the ready market that exists to buy these from anyone on the street. And so we are targeting those receivers because we recognize that that is creating the appetite for opportunists to come out and make hundreds of dollars. We had an arrest of, I believe it was 3 individuals in downtown Los Angeles last week that had a car full of catalytic converters and the cutting equipment and so forth. And each reported that they were making $300 to $500 a night as individuals, going out and spending a couple hours of surveying neighborhoods, finding targeted vehicles, sawing those items off, and then reselling them. So our effort is to target the resale market, to find those salvage yards and others that are profiting from these devices.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. Commissioner Kalanche, any questions for Chief Moore?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonner, any questions for Chief Moore?
Yes, please. Chief, I wanted to go back to the issue of mass shootings, and I'm in particular referring to the situation, I think it was probably as we were meeting last week, when there was a discovery or a search warrant served on Sunset Boulevard, and there was the gentleman that had the individual who had the 24th floor or the 18th floor apartment unit with a bunch of guns pointed down, I think, up the street. And the question really you can answer either broadly speaking or whatever is appropriate to say relative to that situation. But the question, really is about these situations where it's not uncommon when someone has perpetrated a mass shooting to find out that they were on a law enforcement radar screen in some way, shape, or form at some point in time leading up to a shooting. And so here you have a situation. I understand that it was shortly after the early reports were that there were a bunch of charges and some concerns, and then sometime after that it was reported that it may have been a different situation. But if you can recap whatever is appropriate to say about that situation, and then also whether I'm still a little unclear as to what the red flag laws are in California, whether that has any application to the situation or anything similar.
So thank you. Well, and yesterday, thank you again for attending, as you do each week, the crime control meeting as we talked about issues of crime and our efforts and strategies to provide for the safety of the community. And where this topic was brought up. I am grateful for the community member that brought this matter to our attention. The individual felt threatened by the suspect, felt that their personal safety was in danger, that this individual was potentially planning some type of shooting or killing of residents around the place in which he lived. That prompted an investigation by the department where we found a residence that had an array of weapons, and this received some media attention. We alerted the media in an effort to reaffirm to the community that when they see something, say something. In this instance, our initial investigation found prohibited weapons as well as others that had been lawfully acquired, and an individual that we're investigating as to determine what his motives were, whether or not the impact of mental health event or circumstance was contributing to a sense of paranoia or a sense of anxiety, or whether it was influencing him to act out in a way of a mass shooting. The initial look into this does suggest that he was preparing for some type of shooting event from the location in which he resided. The array of the weapons and the manner in which they were displayed appeared that he was readying, if you will, a bird nest, if you, for lack of a better description, of operating from and attacking individuals with fire with a mass shooting event. The FBI has now become part of this investigation out of similar concerns about what his motives and what his true intentions were. And that investigation continues, not just an initial warrant at the location, but a search warrant has a secondary coming back to the location to gather evidence from electronic media and so forth of what other pre-events he may have been doing, whether it be research or what he was, how we can gain insight into what he was contemplating. I don't have answers to that yet. The point I want to stress, though, is that instances such as this, as you've indicated, in mass shootings frequently, the vast study of those have found that 70 or 80% of the time, when we look back, we saw telltale signs and messages from friends and families and colleagues that saw something unusual, remarked that the person's behaviors were changing, their expressions were changing, and took little note of it, or just felt that they didn't want to be the one to speak up out of fear of embarrassment or overreacting. In this instance, I'm grateful that someone took the verbal threat seriously and brought us in as an effort to stop this, as we see the instances of mass shootings across this country and in this state, what we've seen with the tragic events on New Year's Day, shortly followed by Half Moon Bay. These are the times in which we live with ready access to firepower that can be lethal and significant. We need all of us to work together. Lastly, red flags laws in the state in which a gun violence restraining order was obtained against this individual based on the conduct that we observe is meant to be an added safe measure in which an individual may be threatening or demonstrating a potentially for violence, in which a community member, neighbor, family, friend, or police officer can bring the facts and circumstances before a judge and receive a preliminary injunction so that that person cannot have weapons immediately at their disposal. Now, that individual has their day in court. They are allowed to go back to court and petition for the recovery of those should there be a misunderstanding or a rationale that demonstrates before the court that the person doesn't pose an immediate risk to public safety. But those gun violence restraining orders are an important element. We've had them for decades in regards to domestic violence circumstances, but I am grateful for the legislators who've expanded that beyond domestic violence instances where we can now look to outside of just those relationships to just the day in, day out interaction with people who express themselves in a manner that suggests that their propensity for violence is ready and at hand.
And I appreciate that. One just other quick follow-up in reference to the whatever ongoing investigation is in play. And again, I'm not asking for you to get into the details of that, but is your reference to the FBI's involvement, is the FBI kind of taking it from here, so to speak, or is there still some department, is the department still involved in some way in whatever ongoing investigation and activity is in place?
It's a joint investigation. We will we'll pursue, again, they will pursue federal charges if they find evidence that support that. We will continue to pursue state charges as the joint investigation unfolds.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Decker, any questions for Chief Moore? Chief Moore, recently the public has seen once again how fentanyl is the scourge of our community, if not nation. We recently learned that in cross-border pharmacies, routine prescriptions are being laced with fentanyl. What, if anything, is the department doing to curb this disaster that we see slowly rolling out across our city, our county, our state, our country?
Thank you. It is a 4 out of 10 counterfeit prescription pills contain a fatal amount of fentanyl. That is a fact that we know because of the millions of pills that are being recovered across the country that are, again, pill mills that are primarily out of Mexico that are importing those into the country under the guise that they're a prescription drug that is generally a painkiller. We know in America that prescription drug abuse is one of the leading problems we have in the abuse of substances that, and unfortunately, that while controls have been put in place to better track the distribution of painkillers and improve accountability through retailers and pharmacies so that we tighten the what was previously ready access, that has created a demand for these pills from the illicit market. And a ready supplier being drug trade organizations primarily out of Mexico that have the ability to take fentanyl in a very cheap basis and produce these pills for cents on the dollar. And then they're being sold in the street for the price tags of dollars, $1, $2, $3, $5, readily available. And we saw young children, young adults, as well as others. And there is a marked trade. Now, I saw the same article, which is pharmacies outside of this country, and I'll say on our borders, particularly in Mexico, have always been a source of concern for counterfeits and ensuring that the drugs that you think that you're buying from a pharmacy south of the border, that you may have material that is not actually lab tested and is not what it is represented to be, a counterfeit. With this crisis, it is yet another avenue that fentanyl is finding its way into because of the monies that's to be made. Our effort is one of education as well as enforcement. In education, we join with LA Unified School District. We're joining with Department of Mental Health. Department of Public Health under the partnership with the DEA, which has a significant role in a nationwide effort to educate and inform our public about the risks that one pill can kill. There's been a number of outreach, and we'll continue that outreach engagement. I'm encouraged by the proliferation of Narcan, now in our schools, as well as now in the city of Los Angeles, going into our libraries. Our officers carry it, as certainly as was demonstrated in this most recent tragic collision, where the individual was administered 3 doses of Narcan because he had injected just before this pursuit, he had injected heroin into his arms by his own admission. And we believe that, and he told us he was overdosing on that. And so we administered the Narcan, and it made a dramatic impact on his recovery. The work of our Gang Narcotics Division, working with our HIDTA task forces, which is a federal drug administration coordinated task force operation, recognizes that LA is a hub of a distribution network for drugs of all makes, and certainly including fentanyl across the country. So we are both a through point, which has been the case for decades, and for fentanyl over the last 5 years, it's been a case where we've been primarily a through point. But more recently, this last year to 24 months, we've become a retailer as well. So while early on the trend was for us to be a waypoint for the importing into the country and then distribution across other major points of the country, we've now become a local retailer on this as well, and it's seeped into our retail market, a street market, if you will, of drugs, of illicit drugs, and we're seeing their corresponding death rates soar in regards to fentanyl. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're mind-boggling as far as the number of people that are dying as a result of fentanyl overdoses. So it's awareness. I do think that the public health system, their outreach and engagement to try to provide for people who have drug addictions, to provide them with awareness and to provide them with treatment and services so they can avoid the illicit market. Because today, everything from cannabis to illicit prescription or counterfeit prescription pills to everything in between is oftentimes laced with fentanyl as a cheap derivative to amplify its potency. And in regards to people will say, well, why would this happen with these organizations knowing that they are killing people? And it's simple greed and indifference to the loss of life here in the States.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, I have no further questions. At this time, we're going to go to item 3 on the agenda, public comment. Madam Secretary, would you please open the queue?
Okay, our first speaker is Jason Reedy.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So hello, my name is Jason Reedy. As many of you know, I'm calling to ask, why does it take the LAPD this long to investigate an assault that happened on video? It is now the 9th week of your investigation into Kevin De Leon's assault on me. And the only question that remains is if the LAPD is trying to cover up for Kevin De Leon, or are they trying to get the truth? Kevin De Leon's story has changed almost every time he's told it. From headbutts to pelvic thrusts, this certified racist has continued to manufacture lies. This delay in the investigation is a deliberate tactic by the LAPD to terrorize me and my family. I risk being wrongfully arrested based on the lies from Kevin De Leon. So what's it going to take to get truth in this matter? How many more lies from Kevin will the LAPD support? How many more lies from Kevin will the LAPD believe? And how many more lies from Kevin will the LAPD use to build a case against me and attack my character? I told the truth from start to end. So with that, I am demanding an end to this LAPD investigation. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 3146.
Hey, did that work?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Well, for 3 minutes,
Okay,
I'd like to
go
speak
ahead.
about I'm not on board with the buyback problem, but I can't speak about it exactly today. And I just wanted to say, I ain't missing you at all. I ain't missing you. No, not missing you. Everything in lawyers' corruption is found in her bone marrow, so I'm missing her. You know, we should have a kiosk chief. You know, McDonald's is getting kiosks. I thought that we should have a kiosk chief, and we don't have to pay anybody and get everything out. They can make decisions. Oh, the event's going over there. We need to move people. We could just have a kiosk chief. You know, I listened back. There's some very, very disturbing things that were said after Bonner had asked some questions. And, you know, about the chief, I had heard on a news report that only 2 chiefs were pulled not out of the inside of the LAP. That was Willie Williams and Bratton, but everybody's been pulled from the inside of the LAPD. That's one thing I've heard. And Briggs had talked, I'm going to get back to Bonner, but Briggs, all those one-on-one conversations and all you commissioners had with the chief needed a cam. We need to hear everything you all talked about with the chief. Steve Soboroff should write everything down before speaking so he doesn't keep saying and before everything he says. That would be nice. And so you're leaving, you know, any new commissioner seems like it's going to be the same stuff. So a very, very, very controversial things that we're talking about police killings and, you know, things have found out of policy and, you know, this rests in this officer stuff, right? But the chief started answering his questions with words about the evolution of policing, but you're not there yet. You know, it's not done. And I wondered if you would get in a helicopter that's not there yet, it's not done, you're still evolving, you could be killed in it. Not one we know that works, you know, it's functioning well. I'm talking about one that doesn't work, you know, you're not there yet, it's evolving, it's not done. How about you driving around a squad car with some CV axles that aren't there, that aren't done yet, you could be killed. And you're going to keep on going at this. It means you're going to keep on with imperfect policing. So you're just going to keep on killing. You can not get it right all the time. So a few people really end up dying, and that's okay with all of you. There's no accountability. Liars. When I didn't know what the issue was, see now I do know. The government cover up of just constant corruption. That's what all of this was. Those statements.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have T.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, y'all need to keep Tyree Nichols' name out your mouth. The hypocrisy is real when y'all have blood on your hands. You still need to name the officers who murdered Keenan Anderson. They were definitely out of policy. They need to be fired and prosecuted. Including a man y'all killed recently that had no legs. I saw the pig push him out of his wheelchair, a W amputee, and he was trying to get away with no legs and you shot him in the back. That's sickening. More. Why did you think it's okay to kidnap Black youth from Dorsey High School without parents' permission and force them to walk across the 6th Street Bridge on Martin Luther King Day? How do you think that's okay without parents' permission? Mayor Bass, rescind Moore's reappointment. There's been an overwhelming outcry from the public that he needs to go and his continued failures. What did this commission do? Rubber stamp that. That's just ridiculous. And Briggs, no, F you. Yes to an all citizen commission body. Yes to an all citizen commission body. And you know what? Police chase folks every day out here. In fact, in the beginning of the year, around January 19th, a police cruiser was on the news, crashed into a pole because y'all are always driving like maniacs out here and causing collisions when you're chasing folks. In fact, didn't y'all kill 2 children in East LA chasing someone? I think the children are like 9 and 4. I can't remember their names. And power and strength to all the families that have their loved ones killed by LAPD. What is going on? This commission is a sham. Y'all continue to be a rubber stamp body. No one is being held accountable. You got multiple folks with blood on their hands and nothing's being done. And you wonder why we continue to say to defund and abolish the police, because y'all are ciphering the community's resources that we need for housing and mental health and education and youth programs and senior programs and disabled programs. But y'all continue this facade of evil. No amount of money can correct this evil, okay? It needs to be abolished. And no to every agenda item that y'all keep asking for dollars every single week to keep committing this evil. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And we're tired of telling you the same stuff every week. I'm freaking tired. Our folks, our Black and brown folks are tired. You know, y'all just need to just end this.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q Jean-Marie.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
I would like to speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah. So I heard one of the commissioners say this morning that we are basically, what's the word I'm looking for? We feel over policed. Well, we don't feel over policed. We are over policed. Regarding you guys' comments on the murder of Tyree in Memphis, question, had those officers been 5 white officers, would you guys make the comments that you're making? Because clearly a week prior to that, Keenan Anderson was tased to death and no one said anything on this commission, right? This is police culture. Regarding the All Citizens Commission body, who chose them? Who are these people? Who chose these civilians? How come the public didn't get input regarding this? And now you guys are about to make another choice to go make it all police again. This makes no sense, right? And then in Los Angeles, we just read in the news last week that there was a SWAT officer who was caught on body camera telling his colleagues, happy hunting, right? Prior to shooting somebody. This is police culture, right? And it's all across the nation. In San Diego, someone was talking about, a police officer said he kills Black people for a living. This is police culture. In Torrance, just recently had 4 officers fired, and the other 14 who were involved, nothing was done to them. This is police culture. In Huntington Park, double amputee shot while he's running with a knife. This is police culture, right? The violence that happened in Memphis is police culture, right? Somebody said, well, they were all Black, so it can't be racist. If you work for Google, you're gonna adjust to Google's culture. You're not going to adjust the Black culture. Google is not going to adjust the Black people, a Black person who come to work for them. No. When these officers go into the system, they're adjusting to the system. I don't care if you put a Black person in there. We have a Black mayor now. We had a Black president. The Black Lives Matter movement came into being during the time we had a Black president. He was just managing the system, just like our mayor is managing the system. You could put a Black or brown person. That's why even in our city council, you had brown folks putting on white face, right? Because it's the system. We need to do something about the system.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Philip Tabby.
Yes, all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hopefully the racism can stop. Also, rest in peace, Chris Teagarden and the other victim whose lives were taken in Panorama City by a suspect high on drugs. You know, I sure called it. This corrupt commission did not have an honest conversation about reappointing Chief Moore. The decision was made even before the public weighed in. The questions asked last Tuesday had very little to do with what it takes to protect the city of Los Angeles. Every single one of you commissioners are compromised. Why are you even discussing getting rid of the Civilian Board of Rights? You think that civilians are stupid and can't make the correct decisions? No wonder you did not care to listen to or comment on any of the concerns last week. Isn't this commission a civilian board? If you're going to get rid of the Civilian Board of Rights, why not get rid of the Civilian Oversight Body too? Get rid of CPAB. Get rid of the Board of Police Commissioners. I think Mike's hypocrisy has rubbed off on all of you. Soboroff, how many times have you disagreed with Chief Bended Knee on officer-involved shootings? Is there a stat on that? This is what corruption looks like. They don't hide it. It's right in front of us. Moore secured 2 more years and lies to the media and colludes with people like Soft on Crime Monica Rodriguez to secure her vote. Moore promotes people that do wrong, like the officer who made misogynistic remarks about the women's coordinator, then is promoted to a senior lead officer, you know, the community officer, even after he was turned down for a vice extension. Mike, there is absolutely no benefit in you staying as a chief of police. You just want that chief's pension after 7 years of service. Wait, you said it wouldn't be a pension, right? Let's call it a stipend, or you know what? Let's call it a tribute to Chief Moore. Anything but a pension. Truth is, you secured your pension. You never even cared about the officers. They had to worry about their jobs day to day, awaiting to see if their COVID exemptions would be accepted. Thank God that situation has changed, but no thanks to you. But really, you want to rescind the Board of Rights? We, the people, want to rescind all of you. We, the people, voted to have a Civilian Board of Rights. But since it doesn't fit your agenda, you want to abolish it. Where have we heard that before? Hey, Soboroff, what jersey are you going to be wearing for the Super Bowl? Is it an Eagles jersey, a Chiefs jersey, or are you going to be wearing a Mike Moore jersey because you're the biggest fanboy out there? God bless our LAPD. We will continue to use our voices.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report, agenda items, and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Well, first off, it saddens me to see Eileen Decker resign. She was one of the commissioners that promised she would attend CPAB meeting, and she did. She also is extremely compassionate, and she knows what I'm talking about. I appreciate you for that. Good luck on your final journey with your career. I also agree with Briggs regarding the Board of Rights. It makes a lot of sense. I do support the agenda items regarding donations and grants. I do support Chief Moore's report. Basically, it's not even worth commenting on any of the negative speakers, believe me. I'm also quite disgusted with the LA City Controller. I think we're in for a rude awakening. With that, I want to ask everyone to stay safe and healthy, and I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Angelina.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'm calling today as a woman, a wife, a mother, to call out the hypocrisy of Chief Moore. As a woman, it does not feel good to be patronized. Last week, you spent a long time discussing women in the LAPD and how to make it more inclusive, representative, and equitable for these female officers. Chief Moore, you are engrossed in identity politics and you say you are pro-women, but your actions don't match your pandering words. Commissioner Decker was accurate when she says very little has changed, little change has happened in the last 10 years, 10 years in which you served as assistant chief and the chief of police. Chief Moore, when you became chief of police, didn't you inherit a female assistant chief? How many female assistant chiefs do you have now? Chief Moore, is it true that female assistant chief Sharon Papa was downgraded to a commander to make room for you to be an assistant chief? Why don't you downgrade Chief Marino and make room for a female now? Didn't you benefit from that type of move yourself? I personally think it should be the best qualified for the job, regardless of gender, and we shouldn't just check off a box, but I think we're all tired of the hypocrisy. Chief Moore, you consistently say one thing out of one side of your mouth and then another thing out of the other side of your mouth. You say Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez did not direct nor ask for the move of anyone, but you also say you take input from elected officials. We know she told you she wanted Slow Contreras moved, and we're not going to stop exposing the truth and calling out corruption. Chief Moore, you say the blue line flag symbolizes the honor, valor, dedication, and sacrifice of law enforcement to protect our communities, but then you say it has been undermined with racist, bigoted, and oppressive values. Which is it? I went to a division yesterday to donate blood for the Red Cross Battle of the Badges. I wore a blue line flag t-shirt. I almost forgot I was wearing it until the officers at the front desk smiled so big and said they loved my shirt. Does that mean they're racist and I'm a racist? I don't think so. It felt great to see these officers light up knowing that the community supports them. It's sad though, in a way, that a total stranger such as myself supports them more than their very own chief of police. These officers see so much crime, violence, death, and tragic circumstances, and we need to do all that we can to increase the morale. You're not going to get enough new recruits if you keep pandering to the anti-cop, cop-hating activists. These same activists have caused billions of dollars in property damage and caused injury and death to officers and civilians. Please stop negotiating with these terrorists. About 9 months ago, LAPD changed the terminology of standing on the black line to standing on the orientation line. This is condescending to Black people, no? What's next? No more Black Friday? Drop the vaccine mandate for officers, new recruits, and even LAPD officers. Also, stop the racist comments from other commenters. It's racist to say white face. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have P. Miller.
Yes, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Yes, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Like to acknowledge and send condolences to the families of Deputies Isaiah Cordero and Darnell Calhoun and the members of the Riverside Sheriff's Department. Also like to support the swift actions taken by Memphis Police Chief Davis to deal with those who did not honor their profession. Commissioner Briggs, you addressed that injustice spot on. Good to see Building Blue Bridges and LAPD walking together and working together this past week. Regarding lawsuits against the LAPD, questions need to be asked not only of the LAPD, but of those doing the suing. If a suspect has a cocaine or drug problem, did any family member try to get their loved one into drug rehab? If a loved one is suffering mental illness, did anyone seek a temporary custody order for their loved one? Why do people wait until their loved one is running down the street maybe with a knife in hand or attempting to carjack someone else's family member or child, putting innocent civilians in harm's way. It is time for reporters and LA political leadership to ask more questions as vigorously as they ask about the conduct of the LAPD. Chief Moore and commissioners, perhaps it would be helpful to have an updated analysis done of in-custody deaths. How many suspects had cocaine or drugs in their system, which gives superhuman strength? Perhaps more input from the medical community is needed. Is there a better solution? Are tasers more likely to bring on a heart attack to someone under the influence? Should paramedics respond as soon as a suspect that has been tasered is in custody? Chief, you and the LAPD have developed and trained in de-escalation and less lethal methods. You have tried to improve the response to literally unknowable scenarios. In closing, it is important for Mayor Bass and council members to know community members support the LAPD. We want LAPD at our community events. We know who shows up to answer the 911 calls, to rescue victims of human trafficking, to stop mass shootings. It is the LAPD. And yes, we do hold you to a higher standard, as it should be. And yes, we want the most qualified candidates, not quota, qualified. And yes, we are tired of our officers being attacked personally and physically. And commissioners, 45 minutes is long enough, and Zoom meetings are just fine. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
1, 2, and 5.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Decker for her service. I've always appreciated her intelligent questions and her presence, and you can tell she's a compassionate woman, and I heard that today. Going to Commissioner Briggs' statements about the Board of Rights and the Memphis situation. If we look at the Memphis situation, how many of those police officers that engage in that egregious thuggery and abuse and criminal act should not have been police officers in the first place? Were any of them deselected during the background investigation? How thorough was that investigation? The selection process is very, very important, and it should not be influenced by political identity politics considerations. Let's take a look at that. That goes for all departments. Regarding the Board of Rights issue, why have civilians? Let me explain. Measure C was voted on by the people of Los Angeles to have an all-citizen Board of Rights review board. Most police agencies do not want a civilian review board, but the LAPD officers, and you can talk to the Los Angeles Police Protective League and get their input, want it. Why? Because they don't trust the command staff to make fair decisions on discipline, and there is an abuse of the disciplinary system. Talk to the officers. They will tell you that. Go on a listening tour. Go to roll calls. So I'm calling on the city council to maintain at least 2 civilians on that board. If you want to change the composition, maybe 1 officer, but you also said sworn officers. That's incorrect. They're command staff, and there's command staff politics involved in the decision-making. So if you want to have sworn officers, then have the same rank as the person that's being charged with whatever the discipline situation is. If it's an officer, make it an officer. If it's a sergeant, make it a sergeant. If it's lieutenant, make it a lieutenant. And really, you should have retired officers of different ranks on the Board of Rights, because no one dislikes a bad cop more than a good cop. Okay, that should sink in. Get people who actually know the system and have done the job to be able to make those kind of decisions. We need transparency and trust. Chief Moore constantly brings up transparency and trust. We, the public, have been asking for the demographic information of suspects on crime reports. The suspect information is provided by victims of crime. Let's get some factual information, because the race issue is constantly injected into more stops of Black and brown than are truly should happen. We need crime information and statistics. Put it on the website. Hate crime information, real numbers of police of crime. Okay, not just percentages, real numbers. I'm out of time. Stay.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark.
Yes, hi, good morning.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So, well stated by some of our callers today. Thank you for that. I'm just going to go through a couple of points because they made these points better than I could. First of all, Commissioner Briggs wants to get rid of a civilian board, sitting on one himself. So it's really just civilians that don't agree with the rest of you, what we're talking about. And you're asking the city council to forward this, the Los Angeles City Council, racked with corruption, investigations, just ineptitude. I mean, that's beyond my comprehension. Chief Moore mentioned 88% of those cops were vaccinated with COVID. Let's get rid of this insane vaccination policy, which they are forcing on our neighborhood council election. Once again, Monica Rodriguez is interfering with a public election. Make no mistake, that is what a neighborhood council election is. She is interfering with elections. Okay? That video of the Huntington Park amputee is just, I mean, come on. What is going on with your hiring? This is where it all starts. He was correct by saying that. This is where it starts. If you're lowering the bar and constantly lowering the standard of an officer, hiring these officers, this is what you get. And it makes all the cops look bad. It makes the public simplify the argument and just take an anti-police position. Is this what you guys want? Can we fix this stuff one thing at a time? Or are you just going to keep burying it in your nonsense? This is unacceptable. Please, I am pro-law enforcement. I'm pro-good cops. I'm pro-equality of the application of arrests and encounters with our citizenry. But everyone is unhappy. Are you guys listening? Are you listening? With the people, with BLM and the most conservative supporters of police, are you listening to us all agreeing with each other? That doesn't disturb you? Please, please use your conscience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mike.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be talking on all items, I guess I would say.
3 minutes.
Okay. On June 20th of 2020, a hate crime occurred in downtown Los Angeles near Alvaro Street. A terrorist group tore down a St. Junipero statue. This is a hate crime and nothing has been done about it. They haven't found out who did it. You know, you don't have to be very intelligent to go on the internet, and you can search photos. In about 20 minutes, you'll come up with about 100 photos of the guys that did it standing on the ropes chanting. It's some ridiculous, I don't even think they're Native American. They say they are, but I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine they'd be destroying property and getting away with it. You know, down by the VA in the federal building, there's that statue of the 4 silhouettes of people with bullet holes in them. I don't know what that's about. That thing stays up. If that got torn down, would there be an uproar? If it had been a Star of David statue, would there have been anything done? But because it's a Catholic icon and a religious, I mean, that's a hate crime. Nothing's been done. The group's open about the fact that they wanted it torn down. They did it. BLM and Antifa probably were part of it. I'm sure they were. Those people are just do nothing but cause trouble in the county, the city. It's all they ever do. So, I mean, that's my only point was that. And we need to stop with the identity politics, especially in government. It's uncalled for. It doesn't do anything to unite anybody in the city, the state, the country. We need to stop it. You know, this whole idea behind having a day of a specific skin color is ridiculous. Black History Month. Well, let's have European History Month then. Or, we have Asian Pacific Islander time, we have Mexican American. If we're gonna have all of them, that's fine, or we'll just have none of them is better. Because we don't need to be singling out one group because of their skin color. It's ridiculous. We all know that everybody contributed to this country. All kinds of people with different tones of skin color contributed to this country, done great things in this country. We don't need to focus on one group for a month and say, well, they did so much. You know what? 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime. I mean, come on. You're not doing White History Month. That would never happen in our country. I don't want it. I actually don't want that. Why don't we just have none of it, because it isn't doing any good for anybody. Anyway, I'm done. I yield my time. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Javier Hermosillo.
Good morning, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to compliment Commissioner Decker on her hard work, her intellect. She's a quiet warrior. She doesn't talk a lot, does not ask a lot of questions, but she gets things done. She's a very strong, steady hand, and I appreciate the work that she's done for all of these years. And for the critics who easily call in a world where ignorance is bliss, this department, between volunteers and employees, is close to 15,000 people, human beings who make mistakes, covering a city of 500 square miles. And Eileen Decker has provided a strong, steady hand, whether she's been the chair or just a commissioner. Commissioner of the board of directors, essentially, with these almost 15,000 employees, spread over 500 square miles. And the commitment is not just on Tuesdays for 4 hours. There's no pay here. You don't get paid by the hour or daily or overtime. This goes for all the commissioners. And so enjoy your next career, Commissioner, and you have my deepest respect and gratitude for your service. On the Board of Rights issues, Board of Rights members are supposed to go in with an open mind, and that'd be cheerleaders. Okay, they have to do an even-handed analysis, and I speak from experience, having done boards of rights for 20 years, and I'm told I did somewhere just shy of 100. It's a very complicated process. We don't need cheerleaders, okay? I respect police officers. I respect the law. My son-in-law is a member of the SWAT team in Riverside County. And I've been around police officers for a long, long time. But there are people who decide to go south and to commit crimes. And I think the Rampart scandal is a perfect example. And because of changes that were implemented, hopefully we'll never have a scandal like that again. But police officers, God bless them, are not saints. They make mistakes, bad judgment calls, sometimes deliberately, as we have learned. And so to those of you who criticize the department, no matter what it is, criticize because they're police officers, criticize them because of civilians on the boards of rights, wake up. The reason we have a city that's safer than most is because of this commission, this chief, and these officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Eugene.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Before I speak, I just wanted to comment on something Michael Moore said earlier about downsizing, the department being downsized. Interesting interpretation of downsizing when y'all have received just about every increase in budget that y'all have asked for the last God knows how many years. I also wanted to just call out this commission and just highlight the fact that y'all are making the city less safe. Every time you ignore the will of the people every time you look the other way when a civilian is brutalized and murdered or locked in jail for police misconduct or corruption. You make the community and you make the city less safe. Last week, Soborov came out and said in the comment that, he wanted us to call him in rather than call him out. Steve, what do you think we've been doing for the last several years? We have tried to call you and the rest of the commission in, and the fact of the matter is you do not listen. You simply do not care. You constantly rubber stamp police misconduct, murder, and abuse, and the community and the city is less safe for doing that. So I want you to understand that these policies are ultimately what lead to the uprisings that you so desperately try to prevent. You, by ignoring the will of the people, you by ignoring policies that actually will address, as I keep saying and keep calling in and try to highlight, as well as the other callers, by refusing to look at policies that actually address the root of the problem, things that have been tried in other places around the world that have worked, where communities and cities and countries spend less per capita on policing, but spend more on these social programs. And guess what? They have less crime in those areas, in those cities, in those countries. And yet you all, instead of trying and advocating on behalf of things that might work, instead you spit in the face of the public, you spit in the face of all of us who spend and take our time to call in and make our voices heard. You instead choose to ignore us, and it's only making us more upset and the city less safe, and it's gonna be a reckoning for it. On a final note, again, this meeting should not be at 9:30. If you really cared about the voice of the community, which you clearly don't, you would make the meeting at 5 or not 5 o'clock, at 6 or 7 o'clock like you did 2 weeks ago. That's the common sense thing. Make the meetings available for the public so we can tell all of this shit to your face.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Yadi.
Yes, hello. Can I speak on all items?
Yeah, sure. 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. On 6E ALPRs, I'm against the use of ALPRs. I find that it's an invasive form of surveillance tech. Furthermore, I object to the report's notion that people in public spaces should have no expectation of privacy. I don't expect to see surveillance equipment when I go on hikes or in public bathrooms. That we should have no expectation of privacy while living our everyday lives is an absurd justification for the technology. There's no reasonable rationale for having a 2-year data retention policy. Despite the relevant laws and regulations, LAPD and the LA City Council can decide to have a shorter data retention period. 2 years is excessive, irrational, and indicative that ALPRs are really just mass surveillance. So let's keep it real. Finally, thank you for the continuing reminders of all the janky surveillance tech you have at your disposal, and right on the heels of that ridiculous robot dog you acquired. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Zach.
Yes. I'll participate in this parade, and even though I have no intention of doing so, I'll say that I'm going to speak to all items so that I can get 3 minutes. Okay? Yeah. These like encomiums to Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Decker, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to pass through this Board of Commissioners undigested. You sit silently, you let topics go by, you've been complicit in all of this. Chief Moore, you're an abject failure, and your reappointment is no surprise, but is just another eye roll at the it's so weird that you don't ask questions about things, commissioners, and then like when the chief brings up something that is relevant to your own personal experience, like catalytic converters, Chief Moore almost called it an emergency, and with the exception of one commissioner, there's either no questions about any of the rest of it or one kind of like urgent tone question about that. It's all just so absurd, and this commission is such a sham. And so both things need to exist at once. We have to call out how ridiculous you are, while at the same time not expecting any meaningful change from you, and just the continued business as usual and lethal racism of the LAPD. The kinds of racist statements, Commissioner, shocking again isn't the word, but just like y'all put up with is, it raises the eyebrows. And finally, I'll close by saying that if one of the commissioners is indeed such a fanboy of Michael Moore, then clearly he's going to wear a Chiefs jersey.
Madam Secretary, I think we've lost the caller. And we go to the next one and it will be the last.
Mr. President, that was our final speaker.
Okay, thank you. This time we're going to go to item 4. I move that we adopt the findings and recommendations under item 4. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you. This time we're going to go to item 5 on the agenda, the consent agenda items. Are there any commissioners that want to ask questions about any of those items? Seeing none, I move that we adopt items 5A, B, C, D, and E. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. At this time, we're going to go to item 6, the regular agenda items, and we'll have the department's verbal presentation and discussion concerning the African-American sworn officers recognized for Black History Month. Can we have Commander Flores, please? Commander Flores, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen, sir?
We can. I think you may want to make that slideshow a bit larger.
Yes,
if you can
sir.
expand it.
Sorry about this.
Like cute. Oh like so pretty. Like things like that.
Commissioner Sobroff, can you close your mic? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for the delay. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Good morning. Commander
morning.
Ruby Flores, I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the department. And this morning, it is my great honor to present to you on our rich history in honor of our Black History Month. First, we start with our first Black officer, patrolman, as they were referred to back then. In 1889, Robert W. Stewart joined the department. If you may recall, Officer Robert Stewart has a unique history with our department and the city. So he worked with our department for 11 years, working downtown, patrolling the streets, but he was falsely accused and was fired. He was acquitted by a jury, but was never hired back as a Los Angeles Police Department officer. Last year, the department sought to right a historical wrong, and this commission officially reinstated Stewart. Central Police Station roll call room was then named in honor of Stewart's name. Policewoman Georgia Ann Robinson, LAPD's and nation's first sworn police Black officer. In 1916, she retired. She retired due to an incident where she was left blind due to an incident where she was involved in a fight in the jail that she was assigned to at that time. She had worked 12 years before that time. Lieutenant Roscoe Rocky Washington, LAPD's first Black Patrol Watch Commander. This was in 1940, and he was assigned to Newton area as the watch commander. Homer Broom, he was our first Black captain and commander. As a young policeman in his early years, he worked a traffic assignment. He's also a noted author and historian. He wrote and published the book LAPD's Black History from 1886 to 1976. Assistant Chief Jesse Brewer. Assistant Jeff Brewer retired in 1991 after 39 years of service, and he was the highest ranking African-American in the history of the LAPD. He was then appointed to Police Commission and helped lead the department's transition from Chief Gates to Willie Williams. Chief Brewer is a founding member of the Oscar Joel Bryant Foundation, which is still active today. Chief Willie Williams, he served as our chief of police from 1992 to 1997. He was our first Black chief of police. Chief Bernard Parks, he was our first Black chief of police to be selected from within the ranks of the Los Angeles Police Department. He served from 1997 to 2002. Then in 1950, Sergeant Vivian Strange was our department's first female Black sergeant. She was also, before retiring in 1966, she was responsible for establishing the department's first community relations section. Lieutenant Marion Helen Camp, LAPD's first Black female lieutenant. That was in 1981. Captain Ann Young. She was our first female Black captain in April of 2000. Police Administrator 3, Rhonda Sims Lewis. She was our first Black female administrator. She was the CO of Administrative and Technical Services Bureau. Regina Scott. She was our first Black female commander and deputy chief. She is now retired, but her last command was in Operation South Bureau. She served our city for 34 years. She was also the former president of our Los Angeles Women Police Officers and Associates. And Chief Paysinger, ECP, as we so fondly referred to him or called him. He was the longest serving director of the Office of Operations in the department's history. He oversaw 14 straight years of Part 1 crime reduction while focusing on the community and building bridges between the community and law enforcement. And this is today's highest ranking Black officers from left to right. Deputy Chief Gerald Woodyard, serving at Operation South Bureau. Deputy Chief Amada Tingrides, serving at Community Safety Partnership Bureau. And Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton, Operations Valley Bureau. And I have to close this presentation with a special honor in honor of LAPD's first SWAT officer that was killed in the line of duty. It was 15 years ago today, February 7th, 2008, in which Randy Simmons was killed in a line of duty.
Thank you, Commander Flores. I think it's important that we recognize all the contributions made by Black officers throughout the history of LAPD and those contributions that are continuing to be made to both our city and our department by officers of color. So I appreciate this presentation. And at this time, I'm going to ask whether or not any commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Sobroff, any questions from you?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I don't have questions, but it's a moving and a very narrow piece of the contributions made at a really important time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sobroff. Commissioner Bonner, any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kalanche, any questions or comments?
Just a quick thank you for the presentation. I didn't know a lot of this history, so it was very informative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Decker.
I just wish to join in the thanks for the presentation, Commander Flores, and perhaps most especially for recognizing Randy Simmons on this important day. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commander Flores, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And at this time, we're going to go to item 6B on the agenda, the department's verbal presentation on human trafficking. Can we have Deputy Chief Pitcher, please, and Captain Miles?
Good morning, Chief and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. We can't see you, but now we can see you.
Good morning, everyone. As you know, January is recognized as the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and the department just completed participation in the annual statewide Operation Reclaim and Rebuild with its law enforcement and community partners from all around the state. This morning, we're going to be providing you with a brief overview of the problem of human trafficking in Los Angeles and the department's ongoing enforcement and community efforts, and also the efforts of one community-based resource provider to rescue those victims and what happens thereafter. So in order to give you this presentation this morning, this brief presentation, which will include a PowerPoint, I want to first introduce Detective 2 Mario Gallegos. He coordinates the Human Trafficking Task Force efforts for the department and also works with the many human trafficking task force advocates throughout the city. Joining him will be Lieutenant Robin Richards. She is currently the officer in charge of Operation South Bureau's Human Trafficking Task Force. Lieutenant Mark Evans. He is the officer in charge of the Operations Valley Bureau Human Trafficking Task Force and will present a perspective from the Valley. And also joining us is Mr. Dave Cox. He is the COO of Zoe International. It's an organization that provides human trafficking prevention, rescue, and restoration efforts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Mario Gallegos that will lead you through a brief PowerPoint presentation, then followed by Lieutenant Richards and Lieutenant Evans and Mr. Cox. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Commission. Thank you for your time. And just as Chief Pitcher had discussed, we just finished our Operation Reclaim Rebuild. That's an operation that we partnered with 82 different agencies, various nonprofit groups that provided victim services. And just so you understand, we had 368 arrests over a 7-day period. The LAPD was involved in 116 arrests during that operation. We had 68 sex workers detained and arrested during that operation. We had 37 sex buyers arrested during that operation, and 6 exploiters were arrested during that operation. It's fairly robust and very successful operation. Also, we were able to provide services to a total of 125 adult women who were recovered during those operations. I'll move on just so you have an understanding. Citywide, all of our vice units at this time and our 2 standing human trafficking units have attended our post-certified vice school and also a very intensive 40-hour post-certified human trafficking course up to date. Another thing that we currently are still involved in is a collaborative countywide protocol called the First Responders Protocol. And that is where multiple agencies come together at the response of a human trafficking victim being recovered. And then our agencies like probation, DCFS, and our nonprofit groups that provide victim services, we all come together and work collaboratively to support the victim and to initiate the investigations. Currently, citywide, we are conducting 6 to 8 human trafficking operations citywide. And those operations are strictly focused on the recovery of human trafficking victims and the apprehension of our suspects. Each bureau will come together. For example, Central Bureau will come together. We'll have Central Vice, Rampart, Hollenbeck, Newton. They'll come together once or twice a month for their bureau, and they'll conduct operations. We do that citywide, like I said, 6 to 8 times a month. All these operations are supported by DCFS. They're supported by probation and our partners at Save the Innocents, Zoe International, and Journey Out. The next slide.
Can we share the PowerPoint?
Yes.
If you're reading from a PowerPoint, we can't see it. Were we meant to? Okay.
Yes,
there you go.
they're bringing up the PowerPoint now, sir.
Thank you.
You can go to slide 3. So here we're going to be speaking about our recoveries. The definition of a CSEC is something, a very common term that we are seeing, that's how we decide whether we have a victim of some type of sexual abuse, but specifically for commercially sexually exploited children, they're referred to as CSECs. And so what you can see in 2022, this year, our agencies worked with DCFS and recovered 102 children within that genre of CSECs. Also, we partnered with DCFS and probation in 2019 and started they're called multi-agency collaborative locate teams. The purpose of these teams are specifically, we receive a intel package from DCFS or probation on a specific juvenile that's missing. Most of these juveniles do have history of being involved in commercial sex activity. As we receive that package, we then assign officers and other probation officers, DCFS workers. We work as a team in recovering them. In 2022, we recovered 44 missing juveniles. We can move on to the arrest. Just so you have to also, for arrest-wise, citywide, we are involved in working with specialized attorneys out of the Sex Crimes Division from our DA's office. And we, as you can see, in 2022, we filed 46 felony charges. These varied from human trafficking of a minor to pimping and pandering. And this year we presented 60 cases. So we presented 60 cases, and out of those 60, we filed 46. To give you an overall understanding on this next slide, we're continuously involving ourselves in different operations. Our newest partners with the U.S. Marshals, in 2021, we started partnering with them as they had created a missing children's unit. The sole objective of this unit was to go out and recover missing children from all parts of the country. They had newly began a unit within the city of Los Angeles. We partnered with them, and in 2021, we kicked off an operation called Operation Restore Hope. And during that time, we recovered 13 missing juveniles as we worked with our U.S. Marshals partners. Another operation that we partnered on was a nationwide operation. It's called Operation Cross Country. This operation was spearheaded by the FBI. We've supported them several times regarding this specific operation. This is a 7-day nationwide operation. And during 2022, we worked side by side with them, and actually were able to arrest 2 traffickers and recover 2 missing juveniles that were victims. The last operation that we've been involved in was last year's 2022 operation. And this is Operation Reclaim Rebuild. This is our 9th year of being involved in partnering with the Los Angeles Regional Human Trafficking Task Force. And this operation is our statewide operation where we use Northern and Southern California law enforcement agencies. We are supported by the DA's office. We're supported by social service agencies and all of our NGOs. This is our third and largest operation that we are partnered with during 2022. I'm going to now introduce Lieutenant Robin Richards. He is the Vice Coordinator for South Bureau.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thanks for having us. I'm Lieutenant Robin Richards from Operation South Bureau. Here at Operation South Bureau, our mission for the Human Trafficking Task Force is to recover victims of human trafficking. Operation South Bureau partners with our DAs for successful prosecution, and our investigators connect victims with non-governmental agencies so the victims can have a successful out of their sex trafficking life. The deployment for South Bureau, we have one supervisor and 8 investigators that conduct our investigation. In 2022, Operation South Bureau had 238 arrests, and 17 of those arrests were for human trafficking suspects. There were 42 victims altogether, with 9 of those being adult victims. In 2022, there were 74 for 2022, we have 74 active human trafficking investigations that are currently being investigated, and 22 anti-human trafficking operations were conducted in 2022. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from any of the commissioners? Not at this time. You can continue to proceed. Thank you.
Yes, and now we'd introduce Lieutenant Mark Evans. He is the Vice Human Trafficking and Community Engagement Coordinator.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Lieutenant Evans. I'm the Vice Coordinator for the San Fernando Valley Operations Valley Bureau. And I've overseen this Human Trafficking Task Force. In fact, started it. This will be going on 8 years now, with a lot of support from everybody at the top, including the Police Commission and City Council and our command staff as well. So I appreciate all the support. We conduct daily operations. So we have 1 sergeant, 1 detective, and 4 investigators. We're currently interviewing to hire 2 more investigators, and they conduct human trafficking investigations every day. So we partner with the community. We've done that through the formation of 647 Tips email. We've been able to develop strong relationships with the community, and that's something that I'm proud of because of that community engagement. They help us focus on providing the services that they need. We also have partnerships with non-governmental agencies. We use Journey Out a lot, and we've actually got an emerging partnership developing with Zoe International, which has honestly been a long time coming, and we've used them just recently, and they've been a great provider. So thank you for them and their support and their efforts. One of the things that I've been able to do was teach LA Unified School District regarding elements of human trafficking, and that's been significant, and it's also helped them provide services to human trafficking victims off of the school campuses. We conduct investigations every day. We've made 372 arrests for various crimes last year, prostitution-related crimes, which includes human trafficking, pimping, pandering, and so on. 17 of those arrests were human trafficking suspects. And I think another interesting note is that we recovered 2 adult victims, but the way we conduct our operations in Valley Bureau is very different. I use my undercover personnel, and I can't go into the particular details of how I do this, but we use our undercover personnel to typically become the victims of pandering, and then we use those to pursue more elements of human trafficking cases. So the theory behind that is we're able to control human trafficking and hold those suspects accountable. But rather than having a member of the public be the victim of this heinous crime, we utilize our officers who are then going to court and testifying as well. So that's why that number is a little lower than maybe some of the other bureaus. And then we've offered every female that we encounter, which we treat as victims of human trafficking. We provide them and we offer them services. Well, let me rephrase that. We don't provide the services, we offer them services through our NGO partners. And there's been some great success stories. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into those success stories, but I wish those could be shared on a more frequently. And thanks for the time.
Okay, now I'd like to introduce David Cox. He's the Chief Operations Officer from Zoe International.
Great. Thank you, Detective. And I want to just say thank you to the commissioners for hearing this critical report on human trafficking. It's really is a scourge on our society. And I want to highlight and thank LAPD, their Detective Bureau, also the vice officers, Lieutenant Evans, he's really known in this field as well. But you're all talented, you're gifted, you're experienced, and I know you have a heart to end child and adult trafficking. And LAPD always stands out as the top performing agency whenever Reclaim and Rebuild happens. So we thank you for it. You're recognized here, but also globally. A little about Zoe. For over 20 years, we've worked to end child trafficking through prevention, rescue, restoration efforts. We have 150 staff that serve globally in Thailand, Japan, Mexico, and Australia, but we also have a team that serves here in the United States. During the Obama administration, he sent an anti-trafficking task force to Thailand. And they visited our campus and they saw the success we were having with restoration. And they asked Zoe if we'd extend and expand our work, direct care work domestically. And we agreed to do that. And we started in LA. And that's strategic because California is the #1 state in the nation with the most identified human trafficking cases, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And LA is the #1 city within California with the most identified human trafficking cases. The work that we do prevention, we provide education and awareness to the community about human trafficking. It can be at schools, government or community agencies, houses of worship, businesses. We do a lot of collaboration. We serve on several key task forces and roundtables throughout the city. We'll support our task force efforts of our human trafficking and vice operations, whether it's translators or victim identification. We also do advocacy. In 2019, we contracted with DCFS to provide 24/7 victim advocacy. So when law enforcement recovers a child, we'll respond within 90 minutes to support child trafficking victims. And we'll do that with them for the next 1 to 2 years. We work with them and their family. Zoe supports the youth up to 21 years old throughout the investigations and prosecutions. And this transition out of life can be really dangerous. It's a key time. That's why it's really, LA has really led the charge in coming up with advocacy. It's been a difference maker. Some of our kids have been stalked. They've been beaten, burned, branded with the name of their trafficker. We have kids who have back problems from being forced to wear heels, for standing on the track for hours. We know victims who have jumped out of moving vehicles to escape. Some kids have been raped thousands of times before they've even been old enough to drive. And that's the sad state of it. Some go missing, some are even killed. So if you've never seen a child who's been trafficked, it is heartbreaking. Those kids are often angry. They struggle with mood swings, obviously. They're trauma bonded. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. It's similar to what we see in domestic violence cases, where they're triggered to run back to their exploiter. So it takes him healing. And I want to share a story of a girl we call Hope. She was exploited by a violent trafficker. Her trafficker was arrested, but sadly released from jail a short time later. And in retaliation, this trafficker came after her and her family. He shot at her home. And when this took place, Zoe helped them relocate for safety. But we call her Hope because she lives in hope that she can ultimately be free, and she's escaped from him. There were 489 kids who received services in 2022 in LA, just like this girl we called Hope. And that's just the ones that we know about. In fact, this crime is so common, they gave it a name that Detective Gallegos mentioned called CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children, there's commercial operations targeting our kids. The youngest we served last year was 11 years old. And this is why the incredible work of our vice and human trafficking units is critical. We cannot do this work without law enforcement. We focus on restorations and we see results. There's a girl that we call Faith. She completed Zoe's 1-year program and she said with tears in her eyes, "You guys saved my life." And we often find these kids, they get back to school, they get a job, they go from just day-to-day survival to actually dreaming about their future. In 2021, Zoe answered a regional need and we opened a home for youth and child trafficking victims. And it's located here in LA County. It's licensed, it's accredited, it's on a beautiful 50-acre campus. And this is where healing begins. Kids will stay there for 6 to 9 months until specialized foster care homes can be identified. I'll end by just mentioning a brave young woman. We call her Joy. When she saw our home, she loved the beauty of it. And in her words, she said, "I finally felt like I could breathe." She also said if it wasn't for law enforcement rescuing her off the street, she doesn't know where she'd be or even if she'd be alive. So I want to just, I'll close with this, but fighting property crimes, it is important. But protecting the children of Los Angeles who are bought and sold like property, I can't think of a more noble and critical use of law enforcement resources. So we honor your commitment of resources. We applaud your dedicated efforts to rescue children from human trafficking and arrest the predatory traffickers who target them. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Briggs, that's the conclusion of the HTTF presentation outlining the department's efforts as we work with community partners to impact human trafficking in LA, throughout the city and the county. Everyone on the call is available for the commission's questions.
Thank you, Chief Pitcher. I have a question, and it can be divided between Detective Gallegos and Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox, you partially answered one of the questions that I was going to ask, and that was the age range of the children that you are finding being exploited. You said that the earliest you found was 11 years old. I mean, I just find that despicable. But can you give not only the commission, but also the community a sense of how a child finds themselves being exploited in this fashion? I mean, are they from broken families? Are their parents just negligent? Are their parents themselves partaking in this? Are they in foster families? I mean, what is the road that these children are taking that perhaps we in the larger society can take to divert them from that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. The bottom line, traffickers, they're predatory and they're going to look for the most vulnerable. So obviously kids who are vulnerable without parents are in foster care and have moved around, they're less stable. So it puts them in a more vulnerable position. And traffickers definitely target those type of kids, but it's not just those kids. It can be kids who have a stable family and they're often coerced. We have people who pose as influencers online. They can even have huge followings and they'll entice these kids and then they can get exploited. And then they could get, their families can get threatened. They can get threatened. Some kids are being exploited and they don't even recognize that they're being exploited. They feel like someone's finally giving them attention. One thing we say is if a kid doesn't feel like they have anybody in their life, or they don't really have a caring adult in their life, there's a trafficker lying in wait to become their somebody. And they'll say things those kids have always dreamed somebody would say to coerce them. And then they'll be put in situations where they're going to be compromised. And then often it turns violent. And then there is no escape. They'll threaten them, they'll threaten their families. And so what we're seeing is our kids are facing violence on a daily basis. But their journey into it's often online. They're targeted online. They can groom these kids and they'll study these kids. You have to understand they are master predators and they're ruthless. And that's why having the support of law enforcement Without that, these kids really don't have hope. It takes serious, dedicated enforcement efforts, and LAPD has really led the charge in this to go after these perpetrators. Sometimes it takes a while to build a case as well too. That's why having experienced investigators involved is really key. But that's a short answer of how kids can get exploited and into this. I think you're on mute, sir.
I'll just follow it up with one question before I turn it over to other commissioners. You mentioned exploitation online. I'm aware of other law enforcement agencies and perhaps some federal agencies that monitor online trafficking for just such purposes. And do we have something like that in our department?
Yes, Commissioner Briggs, as you know, we do have our ICAC unit, and they are based out of Long Beach, and they do handle and monitor all of our online cyber crimes, specifically focusing the exploitation of children. Our vice units and our human trafficking units, they do have the ability and they do conduct their own online undercover investigations.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Decker, any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. First, thank you all for your presentation. And I do know that we postponed this from January, Human Trafficking Awareness Month, but perhaps we benefited from understanding the full scope of your efforts during January. And of course, I want to recognize the fact that you work on this the entire year. So thank you for that. Lieutenant Evans, I can't let you go without thanking you, but also when you said there wasn't time to highlight some of the success stories, I certainly understand. We don't, we always try to put some time limits on these presentations, but I wonder, sir, if you would share some of those success stories, because I think they're important for both the commission, but the public to be aware of the work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you. I'll just take a couple minutes to talk about this, but this had to do with a rescue that we had several years ago that really went unspoken, or not, it wasn't really public, but we worked with Journey Out. Journey Out at that time was who we were providing. We were offering up services to the people we helped rescue, and they took a lady and helped her ultimately go through real estate school. She got a real estate license and went on to sell real estate. And as we all know, with the price of homes going up the last few years, I'm sure she did very well in that move. And it was just a great example of the system actually working. We were able to rescue her. We got her to the resources she needed. They wrapped their arms around her, helped her, encouraged her. They mentored her. They took her to court to hold her trafficker accountable. She went on and testified against him, as I remember, and then she went on to get this education and this license, and she was became successful and was able to get out of this life that she was forced into against her will. And I'm sure there's more stories. I wish I was aware of more. I've been at this since I've been involved in the human trafficking world, honestly, since 1998, off and on, and that's before human trafficking laws were even on the books. So I've seen a lot of this, and I wish that there was more public on the successes that were out there. But that's one that comes to mind to me, and it shows the capabilities and the potential that these programs offer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lieutenant Evans. Thanks for the work you do every day. And Mr. Cox, to you, your organization as well, the partnerships that all these organizations, Journey Out, Zoe International, have with LAPD is critical to success. So thank you very much. Commissioner Briggs, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Soboroff.
Chris, thanks. Chris, Mark, can you give a shout out to some other service providers in Los Angeles that you that are helpful to you and that you are helpful to, so people who may be listening or the media can bring them up, because they're all underfunded. This issue is such a huge issue and such a serious issue. Can you talk about any? I know that Lori Jean at the Gay and Lesbian Center for many, many years been doing work in this area. But can you shout out some other service providers that you guys work with?
Commissioner Sobroff, yes, so the LAPD works with many organizations. I know in West Bureau, we have a strong relationship with the LGBTQ Center. Also, they're supported by CAST, which is another NGO group that we have a relationship. Journey Out really specifically does work with our adult victims. Save Innocence works with juveniles and with adults. We've had a long relationship with them. Zoe International, in the last 2-3 years, we've really started building that program with them. But there's just many, many other agencies. Those are our main stakeholders, aside from CAST.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sobroff. Commissioner Bonner.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I echo the comments provided by the other commissioners. I just have a quick follow-up about the task force that you mentioned early in the presentation, Chief Pitcher, especially the county components. You mentioned public health. What are some of the other departments, and is there a MOU in place, or how does the task force function?
So, Commissioner Kalanche, we work with Department of Public Health. We work with DMH. We work with the county probation and also DCFS. They come on board as partners. Everybody funds themselves. We come together for major operations, and then on an as-needed basis, when one of the 4 geographic bureaus conducts an operation where one of these county agencies becomes necessary, the geographic bureau vice units reach out to those entities and make them partners, for the operation. So they do that literally on an operational basis, as well as when they conduct their operations week in and week out. So we have a great working relationship with the County of Los Angeles and all of these entities that I've talked about. They will work with us all of the time, every time. Great results. We hand over, the rescued individuals with them, and ultimately, they serve their agency's purpose, working with us to enhance the services that are given to the rescued individuals, whether adult or juvenile.
Thank you for that. Very helpful. Can I ask you about DMH? So if you encounter a child or an individual that is rescued, are they provided DMH services automatically, or is there some sort of commitment from DMH?
Commissioner Kalanche, I'm going to have Detective Gallegos share with you.
Okay.
He's got a great example of
Perfect.
DMH
Thank you,
component
Detective.
involvement.
Thank you.
Sure, Commissioner Kalanche. So a lot of our recoveries occur when our juveniles or even our adults are recovered off the boulevards. And so they're usually in very difficult states. We have, sometimes there's sleep deprivation, they have not eaten, they're under narcotics, under the influence, and also they're dealing with several mental health issues. So the investigators know that during their preliminary interview, they're going to be assessing that person. If statements are made where, well, let me backtrack. If we have a juvenile and we start once a juvenile is recovered, we're automatically calling DCFS, and DCFS is sending folks from the MART unit. Those folks are especially trained to recognize and to handle this community. During those interviews and during this investigation, we identify what are the needs of the child. If there's mental health issues, they then take the child to a place where the child can be assessed. Now, for the adults, typically, if it goes towards an MEU call type of response or a SMART unit response, then those notifications are made, and then we wait for the clinician and the officers to respond, and then they provide. Then the assessment is done there.
And then what happens to the individual? say that
So I think-
that there's a need for mental health services.
Yeah, so for the adults, if they have to be, let's say, placed at a mental health facility, the investigators then we back off and we allow a time frame so that once we hear from DMH or once we hear from DCFS that now the child or the adult's been moved to a certain location, they're in a better state of mind, then we re-engage our investigation. And we come back we will even partner with the clinicians or the social workers and come and do a secondary interview wherever the child is or wherever the adult is.
I'm going to interject a little bit, Commissioner Clanche. The treatment comes first. They ultimately want to make sure that the treatment is provided to the adult or the juvenile victim first before any investigation is conducted, before they move forward. They want to make sure that the needs are cared for and that there is stabilization before any investigation ever occurs.
Okay, perfect. One last question. So as far as these county partners, is there dedicated staff in the county that you work with, that your individual units, because I know that you have different units throughout the department. Is there an individual person or a team that works with you specifically on this issue?
Yeah, so from DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, we work specifically with the MART unit, but within the MART unit, you also have another unit known as the CSEC unit, or Commercially Sexually Exploited Children's Unit. Those units, or those two units, have specialized training to deal with this community. They respond on a 24/7 schedule, and those are our main partners. The CSEC unit, you have one supervisor and then multiple social workers that they carry a caseload, and all of the children on their caseload are all coming from within this community.
Got it. I mean, it seems like it's a program and system that seems to be working as within like the county departments, but also as a partnership. I'm just wondering if this is something that could be replicated as part of our effort to deal with the mental health crisis, that we have these dedicated units. And maybe there is, but I feel like this is a system that seems to be working. Thank you so much for that information. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Clanche, and thank all of you for this presentation. It's very important that the public be aware of what's going on surrounding human trafficking, particularly human trafficking that involves children, and efforts that we can take to ensure that those who are responsible for it are incarcerated. And thank you very much, everyone. At this time, we're going to go to item 4C on the 6C on the agenda. The department's report regarding the automated license plate recognition usage and privacy policy. And we have Director Rhodes come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the next few minutes. I'm here with Chief McMahon to discuss the automated license plate recognition usage and privacy policy. It's a revised policy. We made a substantial overhaul, as this commission, I think, will remember, in December of 2020. And we have a few additional edits or changes that we'd like to go over with you. So I'd like to have my screen shared and I'll go over those changes.
Please proceed. Thank you, Director Rhodes.
So, okay, thanks. So as I said, this is a revised policy. The biggest revision comes on page 2, biggest and necessary revision. We had previously asked for a post-certified training courses on accessing and using the APR data prior to querying the ALPR system. There are no actual post-certified training courses. So we have changed that just to the department's training courses, so that we can both train and then use this system. Then we made some other changes just to make sure that our policy was current. So we had previously said, we had previously indicated that it could be any kind of officer. It's an investigating officer. And then in our determination and desire to make our policies gender neutral, we have changed he and she to they and their.
Director Rhodes, can you have someone advance your slides so that we can track the language that you're referencing, if you don't mind?
Okay, it looks on my screen like I am advancing the slides. I'm sorry.
It's frozen on our screen. But you can
Okay,
proceed. I'm not going to stop this, just that you can continue to proceed.
so I'm not sure. Okay, I'll keep going and I'll try to do this. I apologize. I'm not seeing what you're seeing, so I apologize for that. So let me just.
There we go.
Okay. The next change is, again, gender neutrality. And we had a will instead of a shall. The department usually uses shall, and so we changed that. The next slide, I'm hoping you can see that next slide. We added examples of attempting to verify records obtained. So as you can see, we added example, make, model, and color of a vehicle. After that, we changed, it had previously said, the ITB shall ensure that the management and storage of ALPR data is recorded. We wanted to make sure that that it's properly recorded or retained, so we added the word properly. And the next change was, it was required to be someone designated by the department. That seemed to be a little unclear, so we made it chief of police. And those are the changes. Again, the substantial one is that it should be department training, but not post-certified training, because there is no such thing as that for ALPR. And with that, unless you'd like me to go back to the first slide, if you didn't see that, I'll take any questions for Chief McMahon.
You don't need to go back, Director Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners? Can I see a hand? I see none. Thank you very much, Director Rhodes. I move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Director Rhodes.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to go to item 6D, and the department's report on the levels of review of categorical and non-categorical uses of force report. Can we have Captain Scott Williams, please?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mr. T. Fink, Chief Moore, Inspector General Smith, and members of the public. I'm here this afternoon to present the department's proposal for a significant change to the non-categorical use of force reporting policy. This change, if approved, will improve the department's ability to track and evaluate the applications of force bearing the most liability risk, while maintaining a manageable workload for those line level supervisors tasked with investigating use of force incidents. Commissioner Briggs, can you just verify you can see my PowerPoint presentation?
I can see the first page of your PowerPoint presentation, yes. I can see the second page.
Excellent. All right, so the impetus for the level 3 non-categorical use of force goes back to at least 2018, when the department began to recognize the time-consuming nature of use of force reporting and subsequent investigations for minimal uses of force. The department-wide implementation of body-worn video and the requirement of investigating supervisors to review all body-worn video recordings associated with the use of force significantly diminished field supervisors' ability to be in the field, providing the guidance and oversight we expect. It also bogged down the review process at every level, up to and including CIRD. Fast forward to the civil unrest of 2020 and the subsequent review of the department's response. Gaps in accountability relative to the tracking and review of less lethal options deployed during crowd control incidents were identified. Out of the unrest also came legislative changes that require the department to report more information related to the use of less lethal munitions to the state. The new level 3 use of force reporting policy addresses the issues of workload and the new legal reporting requirements, while maintaining and in some instances enhancing the levels of review and accountability. The new policy also eliminates ambiguous language that often leads to under and over reporting of force applications based upon individual interpretation. To give some context to our proposal, I want to briefly talk about the current state of our non-categorical use of force policy. Non-categorical use of force incidents currently fall into one of two categories: the level 1, which in 2021 accounted for 178 cases or 8% of all non-categorical use of force incidents. And then the level 2, which encompassed the remaining 92% or 2,070 incidents. Of the 2,070 level 2 incidents in 2021, 60% or 1,242 involved low-level force applications and either minimal or no injury to the subject of the force. And I apologize, commissioners, I'm using the 2021 data because we just received the 2022 full year data and are in the process of validating it. And I wanted to be sure you had the most accurate data possible. These next two slides contain the criteria for determining if a non-categorical use of force is a level 1 or a level 2. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read all the criteria, but as previously stated, the vast majority of non-categorical use of force incidents currently fall into the level 2 category. Included in level 2 are less lethal applications that make contact with the person or his or her clothing, unless those less lethal options were deployed during a crowd control situation, in which case they are not reportable unless directed by the chief of police. And when I say less lethal options, I'm talking about the baton, OC spray, the taser, beanbag shotgun, and the 40mm less lethal launcher. Also not reportable under current policy are less lethal misses and applications of non-lethal force. Those would be firm grips, joint locks, body weight, etc., that are used to overcome passive resistance when no injury or complained of injury occurs. The investigative process and standards of review for both level 1 and level 2 cases are essentially the same. The investigating supervisor is required to review all video and audio recordings of the use of force in their entirety and bookmark the relevant portions for subsequent levels of review. Then the divisional training coordinators, divisional commanding officers, bureau commanding officers, and CIRD are also responsible for reviewing the relevant portions of video and audio. You can see how even a very minor use of force could end up resulting in many hours of investigation just in video review alone. As I stated in the opening of this presentation, the proposed changes to our non-categorical use of force reporting policy would eliminate ambiguous language that creates confusion and inconsistency in what is and is not a reportable use of force. It will add a third level, level 3, to account for minor uses of force that pose little to no liability risks, as well as include less lethal misses and applications of force in crowd control situations to achieve better accountability and transparency without bogging down the system. Here's what the new policy would look like. The criteria for a level 1 would remain virtually the same, but would now include any force applied to the neck of an individual that does not meet the criteria of a categorical use of force, as well as any use of force initially reported as a level 3, where the force itself is determined to be out of policy. It's important to note prior to discussing the new criteria for level 2 and level 3, that any complaint of unauthorized force or any investigative conflict would default to a level 1 investigation. Level 2 uses of force would include less lethal applications that contact a person or his or her clothing, except in crowd control, canine contacts or bites, and then any strike, punch, kick, leg sweep, or takedown. The new level 3 would include less lethal applications in crowd control situations, less lethal misses, and then any C-grip, firm grip, wrist lock, joint lock, walk down, application of physical force or body weight that results in a visible injury or complained of injury to the subject. The applications of C-grips, firm grips, wrist locks, joint locks, walk downs, physical force, and body weight that do not result in injury or complained of injury would not be reportable, regardless of the resistance posed by the suspect. A push or baton push in an organized crowd control situation that does not result in injury or complained of injury to the subject would also not be reportable. The investigative and review processes for level 1 and level 2 uses of force would remain the same. Level 3 uses of force, however, would only require the investigating supervisor to review relevant video and audio recordings sufficient to adjudicate the use of force. In addition, level 3 uses of force would be adjudicated and closed out at the area or divisional level, provided those cases were determined to have met all the level 3 criteria. They would not require the review of the Bureau Commanding Officer or CIRD. However, CIRD will implement an auditing procedure as a check and balance. In looking at our 2021 non-categorical use of force statistics, we've done our best to project what those numbers would have looked like under this new policy. We estimated that level 1 cases would have increased by about 11 to 189, but would still represent only 8% of cases. And that 11 case increase would most likely be to address force to the neck. Level 2 cases would have numbered approximately 1,050 or 47% of cases. But here's where it gets a little tricky. Of the 2,248 reported cases in 2021, 590 or 26% would have fallen into the level 3 criteria. However, level 3 would also include less lethal misses and force used in crowd control, which have not previously been reported. And we don't have an accurate accounting for those, so it's difficult to estimate the impact from year to year. For example, in 2022, less lethal deployments during crowd control numbered in the hundreds, mostly due to Safe LA and other major crowd control events, which would have pushed the level 3 numbers well above 1,000. In 2021 and 2022, those major crowd control incidents were fewer, and level 3 cases may have only risen by 100 or fewer. 419 cases in 2021, or about 19%, would no longer be reportable based upon the new criteria. What is accomplished in all this is a reporting process that gives us a better ability to track and evaluate all less lethal deployments, regardless of the circumstances, and places emphasis on those incidents that pose the greatest exposure to liability and public scrutiny. It also streamlines the investigative process to allow for more thorough review and analysis of those cases that need it by reducing or eliminating the review requirements for those cases that pose little or no risk management concerns. With that, commissioners, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Captain Williams. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, I move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Captain Williams, for that report. At this time, we're going to go to item 6E on the agenda, the response to the City Council's request concerning officers' overtime banks. And we have Anna Marie Sauer, please. Police Administrator 3, Anna Marie Sauer, and Police Administrator Trina Unzecker.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
Good afternoon.
All right, Ms. Unzecker and I are both on the call. She and her team have prepared this report in response to the action by the City Council in December of 2022, when they considered the department's September 2022 report regarding officers' overtime banks. She can walk you through the report, or we can answer any questions you have at this time.
Can you just give us a brief overview of the report, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trina Unzecker. I'm the commanding officer of Fiscal Group. Just a little bit of background. During the 22-23 council budget hearings, then Council Member Koretz introduced a motion to report to the Budget and Finance Committee regarding the department's overtime bank. In response, several months ago, the department provided a snapshot with where we were on our accumulated overtime, the provisions in the MOU that set up the framework for the banked overtime, current and future year funds to buy down that banked overtime, and why the buy down of the accumulated overtime reduces liability to the city. The department response was considered in Budget and Finance Committee in November of 2022. And during that committee, the members requested additional information. So during November and December, there were council staff-led conversations regarding a 10-year look at the accumulated overtime bank and a sense of the average cost of the overtime when the overtime is incurred, which is different than the cost that's associated with the payout on separation from the department. So the idea was to provide a sense of what the higher cost would be to the city when that overtime is actually paid out. And so we emphasize that the terms of the cash versus the bank time are a part of the memorandum of understanding for sworn employees paid hourly. And so this would require negotiations with the union, with employee relations group, and the city administrative officer and their representatives. So the result is the department's January 31st correspondence that's before you. That is the end of my summary. And so we're happy to take any questions.
So Ms. Unzicker, just one question. If I'm reading this correctly, the city currently has a liability in the new and the old bank of 140 million for officers banked overtime. Is that correct?
That is approximately correct, yes.
And you mentioned briefly that the MOU requires some negotiation with respect to what piece of this?
Well, it would be an item of negotiation if we were to pay out all overtime hours in cash. For example, there's a limit of 150 accumulated hours during the fiscal group that can be banked. The rest of it would need to be paid out through cash overtime. There's an exception if there's no funding available for cash overtime, but that's something that's part of MOU 24. Those hours are accumulated in a new bank for a given fiscal year, and there's no more than 171 hours that can be paid out. And then there's also, in addition to the issues with the MOU, there's also the question of whether there's sufficient funding available to be able to make that payment. So to that end, the MOU does address for the current year a $5 million buy down that is a part of the MOU agreement. And what we're looking at for the next fiscal year is a $35 million agreement. So the bottom line is that there's certain aspects of buy down that we must abide by the memorandum of understanding that's been negotiated. However, additional buy downs could be part of future consideration negotiations.
Thank you for that explanation. Yes, Chief.
So the existence of this bank is a consequence of the city in years past not having sufficient funding to pay for overtime. The department, if we go back just 2 short years ago, we paid nearly all of our overtime within the FSLA limits in time. So it really grew that bank by about $35 million. Previous to that time, because there was funding for year after year for overtime expenditures, these are non-reimbursable emergency expenses. These are not, not dedicating overtime for amplifying services because we have an excess of funding. These were all emergency instances of extended watch on patrol and so forth. But previous to 2019, 2020, we had sufficient funding, and that overtime bank was reducing, and it was almost down to 100 million, and actually it was projected to go well below that because officers burn that time and time off over the course of time and years and promotions. But with the economic crisis that was brought on by the pandemic, we saw this grow because the shift went to compensatory time.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Kalache, I saw that you had your mic open. Did you have a question?
I actually just wanted some clarification, but I think the chief just explained. I was trying to figure out like if this was something that was done every year where we were banking overtime, but it seems like we don't do that now. Right.
The only clarification is the officer has a choice, but they only have a choice for about 20 hours a month. Because after that, anything that hits what's called the FSLA threshold, we pay in cash, regardless of the officer's choice. Because if it goes into a bank, they get to use that time at their discretion. Currently, banked hours, the officer can only access those hours when we have available staffing that allows them that time off.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalonche. Commissioner Sobroff.
Chief, are there circumstances under which something that requires overtime also allows us for reimbursement from outside agencies, outside corporations, whatever?
Absolutely. Ms. Unzicker or Ms. Anne Marie Sauer are more than capable to respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, we absolutely do have times when we are reimbursed for overtime for various reasons. It may be a federal reimbursement, it could be from the state or the county. It could in fact be under an agreement with another city department. It could also be something that's funded through our city council. But we do have accountable and non-reimbursable overtime. And so both of those are reflected in the bank. But yes, we do get reimbursed for some of the overtime that we expend.
So in the bank, is it the gross number or is it the net number, or what percentage of the total is reimbursed?
I don't have that information in front of me, but we would be happy to get that for you.
Okay, would you guess it's 10% or 60% or?
I would guess it is not the majority, because that is not what makes up the overtime bank, either the new or the old bank.
Okay.
I would guess
For
it could be close. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Trey, I was just going to comment. For example, the biggest part of our budget that's reimbursable overtime is the MTA contract, and that's
Sure.
cash overtime.
Of
as you know.
course.
So the majority of reimbursable overtime is cash, because although the officers have the opportunity to choose, again, those are cash details.
Okay, so the number in the bank is our cost, our net, or is it the total?
That's what the value of that bank is in current and present day dollars.
I
So
see.
for example,
Right.
using the chief's example, at the end of 1920, we ran out of overtime when we obviously between sort of the COVID emergency and then the Safe LA. And so as a result of that, that was a big chunk of overtime that then became part of the bank. And then the following year, when we didn't have cash, again, that goes into this compensated time off bank, but that value goes up based on, officer salaries, COLAs, everything.
Right.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then to that point, on item number 2, if you look at page 2 of the report, that will show you the average hourly rate at which we're paying out. So if you take a look at 2012, we were paying out approximately $47 an hour. But now if we were to pay that same amount out, and that assumes no cost increases that happen along the way, that would be almost $63 an hour. So it's intended to demonstrate the potential additional funds that the city will need to pay and provide to LAPD if we continue to cash this time out when it's not accumulated.
Okay. The other question is there more demand to work overtime than there is supply of overtime hours? Or do most cases just require get it as many people as we can?
In terms of, for example, some of our MTA, some of that reimbursable overtime,
Sure.
I mean, the reality is we have fewer officers. So in some cases, we may have to go into the chief's point, hold people over at the end of their shift, because let's say people didn't come on, or to meet the needs of the contract. We obviously do our best, but the reality is we do have fewer officers today than even if we looked at, the 10 years covered here.
But generally, you don't have 4 officers saying, boy, would I like some overtime, and then somebody picking out which one gets it.
No, I mean, our coast system is a lottery where they sign up, they go into the lottery for that.
I see. Okay.
I hope that helps a
Yeah,
little.
no, that clarifies it perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sobroff. Commissioner Decker, any questions? Commissioner Bonner, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I move that we approve the department's report and transmit it to the city council. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. At this time, we're going to go into closed session. We will start closed session at 12:30. Thank you, everyone. See you there.
Thanks.
Thanks.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda item 7A in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Board Secretary will be just a moment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Briggs, you got in the hang of running these meetings on a tight ship. My stomach thanks you.
Mr. Tiefenk, is the board secretary present?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Tiefenk, can you please read out from the closed session?
Yes, Mr. President. Commission has concluded its work in closed session as relates to item 7A1 in custody death reclassification number 009-2. The chief of police recommendation was to reclassify the incident from an in custody death to a death investigation. That was adopted on a 5-0 vote by the Board of Police Commissioners. Item 7A2, non-tactical unintentional discharge number 010-22. Tactics, tactical debrief, 1 police officer 1. Unintentional discharge is accidental discharge, negligent discharge, 1 police officer 1. That was the chief of police recommendations. They were unanimously adopted by the board on a 5-0 vote. Item 7A3, in custody death reclassification number 011-22. Recommendation of the chief of police to reclassify incident from an in custody death to a death investigation. That was adopted on a 5-0 vote by the Board of Police Commissioners. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefenk. There being no further business before the Board of Police Commissioners at this time, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. See you
Thank
next
you.
week. Bye.
Bye.